It is my honor to present our first candidate for today. We are actually in his home state. He is the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and a Democratic presidential hopeful. I have been practicing the pronunciation of his name. It's Pete Buttigieg, but we just want to say Mayor Pete. And he's the chief executive of South Bend, the city's 32nd mayor. Economic uplift, wealth creation, combined with legal and social change are what he is about to create, an equitable America. Please welcome our next candidate, Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Mayor. Once a mayor, always a mayor. I had the privilege at the Essence Festival recently of speaking at the Montreal Event Center, so it's a pleasure to welcome you, if not to my hometown, certainly to my home state. I know my fellow mayor, Joe Hogsett, has been here, and I'm proud to call him a friend. Want to acknowledge Tim Murphy, Chair-elect of the Urban League Board, and I'm also very pleased that Lisa Rice, leader of the National Fair Housing Alliance, is here. I'm honored to be here because I feel that this brings together my experience as an urban mayor working at the front lines of many of the issues that the Urban League has sought to address since its founding, and of course, as a candidate for President of the United States. Back home, a lot of people gave up a while ago on pronouncing Buttigieg correctly. They just call me Mayor Pete. Feel free to call me whatever you like. I'm running for president because I think America's running out of time. And I believe even now, in this moment, we may well be underreacting. And it's not just this president, although this presidency represents a huge problem. It is the conditions that made this presidency even possible. Because I think a president like the one we've got right now does not come near the Oval Office unless the ground is shifting beneath our feet. And I do not believe we are living under ordinary circumstances. And many of those deeper problems are problems that my generation has grown up with. Endless war, school shootings is a routine, a generation on track to be the first economically in American history to do worse than our parents if something doesn't change. And I believe these issues will only get worse, past the point of no return, if we don't address them. So I'm determined to do away with the failed status quo and master these changes before they master us. There's going to be a temptation to go back to normal because this presidency is so chaotic and exhausting. And part of my message is that there is no going back to normal because normal didn't work. And so I'm here as somebody who has lived many of the realities of our time and is determined to shape them differently. People in my own life, in my family, have been saved by Obamacare. People I know have been killed by the opioid crisis in recent years. My family's own finances were secured on one hand by Medicare and on the other hand are under the pressure of six-figure student debt, like so many in this country. My generation saw this country elect its first black president and then turn around and elect a racist to the White House, and we ought to call that what it is. I'm living the challenges of a 21st century urban mayor, and I'm walking the way of a religious progressive, which brings me to something that I think is really important to assert in the course of this 2020 election, and that is that God does not belong to a political party. Especially in a moment when we hear in church that we are to suffer the little children unto me and then see little children suffering in cages. Voters of faith need to know they have a choice. So I'm determined to bring the experiences that I have gathered as a Midwestern mayor, as a veteran, as a member of the largest and most diverse generation ever, to tackle the changes of the era that's coming our way. And mastering those changes means we must confront the challenge of systemic racism. That is one of the most destructive forces in America and always has been. Because I believe these tectonic shifts that we're facing, that I was talking about, will only be made more unstable by the persistence of racial inequity. Yesterday in Los Angeles, I had a chance to visit Vector 90, a co-working space co-founded by the late Nipsey Hussle and David Gross, two entrepreneurs who are at the forefront of how you grow economic opportunity in communities that have been disadvantaged. It was extraordinary. But I noticed many of the entrepreneurs I met explained that if it were not for HBCUs and the generosity of billionaires helping to fund their time in college, they might not have been able to start successful businesses and create opportunities for others. And I believe that should not be such a matter of fortune and chance. I also met some young high schoolers who were studying STEM as part of an amazing program in Chicago. Really impressive young minds, hopeful about the future. They're also sharing with me experiences they were having with racism in school today in the Midwest, asking me what they're supposed to do about stereotypes that are holding them back. And it's a reminder that if you are black in America right now, your experience puts you effectively in a different country for so many people. If what you have to say in the hospital about the pain you were experiencing is less likely to be believed, if a resume that you send in is less likely to get a call back, if redlining has first hemmed you into a certain neighborhood and now gentrification is pushing you out of it, if you were 4 times as likely to be arrested for the same offense as a white person, you are living in a different country. And I think for too long we have believed that we were on a path where systemic racism was going to take care of itself in this country. I'm going to be speaking about these issues not only with mostly black audiences, but with mostly white audiences, because white America needs to wake up to this. And I invite you to watch us do that in the course of this campaign, because none of us are free while these inequities persist. And by the same token, when black Americans are empowered, when black entrepreneurs, for example, are thriving, they are creating more jobs for people of color and more jobs for everyone. If more young people can go to college, whether it is Harvard or whether it is Howard, that means better educated citizens and workers and leaders. And when more black voters cast their ballots, it seems to me that better decisions get made in Washington for all of us. So we've got to get this right. My own city has seen the limitations of the progress we can make as long as we are in the shadow of systemic racism. And my own city is not alone. It is a national problem that requires national solutions. And as a country, we've learned the hard way that you can't just take a racist structure, replace it with a neutral structure, and expect all the inequality to wash its way out of the system over time. It doesn't work that way because a lot of these inequities got put in intentionally. Therefore, it will require intention and resources in order to reverse them. Now, here at the Urban League, we have you to thank for the Main Street Marshall Plan, which I had an opportunity to learn about and discuss with Morial recently. And that is a real contribution to the conversation. I want you to know that that is one of the things that has informed our Douglas Plan. The idea being that if we can mount that kind of ambition to rebuild Europe, as America did in the Marshall Plan, then we ought to be able to do it right here at home, and we ought to use those kinds of resources to deal with racial inequity in our time before it unravels the entire American project. Now, there's a lot to the plan, a lot more than is in my remaining minutes, which you can find online, but I want to mention just a few key pieces of it. In entrepreneurship, it calls for dramatic investments in economic empowerment that would triple the number of entrepreneurs from underserved areas, especially entrepreneurs of color, like the ones I met yesterday, within a decade. And if we get that right, it'll create 3 million new jobs. In education, we will massively expand access to Title I funds and support the HBCUs and minority-serving institutions that are training the doctors, the lawyers, and the presidents for tomorrow. In health, we propose creating health equity zones where communities come up with plans that make it possible to deal with the inequities that happen both in doctors' offices in the clinical environment, but also in neighborhoods, access to food, environmental factors that hold people back, and get federal support to do something about it. When it comes to home ownership, I propose a 21st century community homestead act that helps people stay in their own neighborhoods when they are rapidly gentrifying, and allows them to capture the value of improvements to their homes. When it comes to criminal justice, we can cut incarceration by 50% without an increase in crime. If we eliminate mandatory minimums, we support alternatives to incarceration, we end incarceration as a response to drug possession, and we establish a federal clemency commission, we can and must ensure that our criminal justice system is actually serving up justice. So those are a few highlights, but I hope you'll take time to familiarize yourself with the plan and to share your feedback about it. Because again, it is a conversation we will be having with voters of all backgrounds in the course of this campaign. I'm hoping to have children one day. And I know that when they are old enough to vote, they will be asking me about what we did in 2020. And I want to be able to tell them that this was the moment when we acted to create an economy where the rising tide actually does lift all boats. That this was the moment when this crazy thing called the Electoral College got put to bed and we started picking our president by just counting up all the votes and giving it to the person who earned the most. I want to tell them that gun violence was once widespread, but we took the actions to make it a rare occurrence. That we did that we beat the odds and got ahead of climate change. And that we took the steps in 2020 to make it the case, by the time they're asking me that question, to make it the case that your race was no predictor of your health or your wealth or your relationship with law enforcement. We have to do that now. And these challenges being laid at our feet no longer permit us to wait or to take our time or to nibble around the edges or certainly to promise a back to normal. There is no going back to the 90s at the hands of Democrats any more than there's a going back to the 50s at the hands of the Republicans. There should not be. There is only a future, and I'm determined to work with you to make that future brighter than our past. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.